All right. Hello, everyone. Hope you guys are having a great Thursday. Busy day. Been kind of flying around a little bit, but happy to be here and talking a little bit about speed work and running specifically. So hopefully you guys get some value from the mini webinar today. Trying not to be crazy in terms of the going overly in depth and creating confusion, but just some simple ways to think about speed work so you can hopefully see better results from a running standpoint. As I mentioned, we'll be covering programming speed work for runners. Some places that I generally like to get information regarding running coaching and programming and speed work and all of those details. These two books I find are very good. Jack Daniels' Running Formula, and then You Only Faster by Craig McMillan. I find myself consistently referring back to them, looking at some of the details just to make sure from a coaching standpoint on track and following people much smarter and wiser than myself. So focus of the presentation today, how to determine your physiological needs. What I mean by that is, do you need to get faster or do you need to improve endurance? We always say we need to get faster, and I think we say that to a fault, not really understanding what we need. So hopefully we can better clarify that, because you can go in two separate directions or a combination of, which would probably help you see better results from a running standpoint. Some basic rules of a successful running plan is something I always like to cover when talking about running, not just the speed work component, because that's actually a very small percentage of your total running miles, but some of those other rules that need to create a good, well-rounded program. And then we'll talk about 4 different types of speed work that you can add into your plan to hopefully run faster and stronger. But if you have any questions, feel free, drop a question in the chat at any point that will come to me directly, or if you want to wait to the very end, we'll have a quick Q&A at the end, but hopefully to go 20-25 minutes in terms of the presentation part, 5-10 minutes max in terms of Q&A, but try to get you in, get you out, and hopefully see better results with your running. So first up, how do you determine your physiological needs? We need to understand what your current baseline is. So what I mean by that is, like I mentioned a second ago, everyone wants to get faster, right? We'll say, hey, I run a 2-hour half marathon. I want to run my next one at 1:57. Yes, you want to get faster. But what does that really entail? If that's a person that can hit paces, that can run in the 7 and 8 minute pace range, right, with some of their speed work, but can't sustain whatever is needed, a 9 something, 8:45, whatever, for a 2-hour marathon, maybe they need to work more so on endurance than they do speed. So we need to understand what our current baseline is. I like to use a few different things to help determine this. First and foremost, a recent race. This gets a little bit tricky at times because the races are so different, right? The terrain, the weather, the temperature, our nutrition and hydration strategy, our training leading up to the race. But if you have a good race that is on a relatively flat course and you know, hey, I pushed myself to my limits for that race, that was a very good race from an execution standpoint, most likely that's going to tell you very close to what your baseline is. Unfortunately, right, if you had a poor race, if you started cramping, you got stuck in the bathroom line, right? There are a lot of different things that cause that end result not to be as good as it can be. That race is really not a good representation of where you're at from a fitness standpoint. So if we have a good race that we say we pushed the limit, we executed well, that's a good indication of where you are. Time trial is another positive thing to add into your program. So 5K, 10K time trials, adding that within the training plan at strategic points just to see what is your current fitness level. What I really like is using the Jack Daniels VDOT calculator. So you can put in either your race time, you can put in a 5K, 10K time into that to see what is your kind of VO2 max. And then from there, it will provide you different paces. What is your easy range, your threshold range, your interval range? It will tell you the different paces that you need to run within your training plan. So you can set up strategic time trials at different points just to see how your fitness is improving. The other place will be your Garmin metrics. So something I'm looking at on a daily basis with a lot of the runners that I work with to look through to see, okay, based on this run, based on the pace, the RPE, the goal for this type of speed work, what do these metrics tell me? The goal is over time, you start to see things trend in a positive direction. You start to see, okay, for your easy run, you ran 10 miles, your easy pace range generally is between 10 and 11. average heart rate, right? We're assuming some of the other variables like temperature outdoors, nutrition, hydration. We're able to keep those relatively constant because that will throw things off to a degree if they're drastically different conditions, like comparing winter running when it's 10 degrees outside to summer running when it's 90 degrees, right? Heart rate should be drastically higher when it's 90 degrees. So if we can look at small chunks of time just to see how you're improving, we can understand what your baseline is. I have some people that do very well executing uh, their easy running, their slow, their long, slow distance running. They do well in that area. But when it comes to speed work, it's just hard for them to achieve those paces. So that's someone that's probably good from an endurance standpoint, but needs to work on running speed and getting a little bit faster. And I have other people, man, they can fly, right? They can run really fast. They can hit those paces, even exceed some of those paces where I'm trying to pull them back. But then from an endurance standpoint, if we say to go out to run a half marathon or full marathon, they have hard time sustaining a slightly faster pace for a long period of time. So in that situation, we might need to work more so on endurance than speed. So I think understanding what your current baseline is very important because you can go two different directions from a running and a programming standpoint. You can go in working on more endurance type stuff, which I think would be again, really mastering the easy pace for short easy runs, long easy runs, work on threshold pace and sustaining a again sub-maximal but challenging pace for a long period of time versus the person who we know, okay, this person needs to get faster. They're just unable to run fast. In order for them to achieve their pace, we need them to be able to run faster and then sustain that faster pace. They're going to be running some fast, short efforts, maybe repetition pace, maybe interval pace. And we'll kind of talk about those a little bit in a second so you can understand what those mean. So figuring out what is your goal overall, looking at your current baseline, understanding your goal for the race, and then thinking, is that realistic? A lot of times we think we set these big goals for the next race and just think, okay, in the next 3 months, I'm going to achieve that. When in reality, some of these goals and things we're aiming for, it takes the body some time to respond and to adapt, to get stronger and to get faster. So if we're more realistic and assume and understand that, you know, this might take me a couple of years, it might take me 1 year to 2 years. So every single race, right? Spring race, I'm running a little bit better. Fall race, I'm a little bit better. Next spring race, I'm a little bit better, right? We inch up over time to see positive results. I feel sometimes we set these short-term goals too high. We train too intensely because we think if we train harder for this 3 month period of time, we're going to achieve that in the next race. We then become injured, we set ourselves back, and we go through this spiral over time of not truly getting there. So if we can pull back the reins a little bit, just slowly, gradually over time, make those improvements, we can see positive results, but also sustain them. So creating a good strategy to bridge that gap and being realistic from an expectation standpoint is really the most important thing to be successful here to get you to the end result that you're after. Some basic rules of a successful running plan. First and foremost, we need to understand the different variables that come into play when creating a running plan. A lot of times people will download or follow a plan with a running group and it's just numbers on a sheet, right? It's just miles, it's just different types of speed work, long run, short run, different things mixed in. They don't really understand that what goes into that plan, and hopefully something goes into that plan because a lot of times you can see there's not a lot of rhyme or reason behind them. But frequency, duration, and intensity is something that I look at very closely. So frequency, how many days per week are you running? Duration, how many miles or the total volume of the program? And then intensity, that's your speed work, that's your hills, your different types of terrain, the things that are going to make running harder, that's intensity. So we want to make sure we don't increase all of these at the same time. So our first goal early on with the running plan would be, okay, with low mileage, with little to no intensity, let's go from running 2 days a week to 4 days a week. Let's slowly add a third day. Then let's add a fourth day. Okay, we achieved our frequency. Next up is duration. Let's build a nice, strong aerobic base, easy running, right? Hitting that easy conversational pace, build up a base from a aerobic standpoint. And then from there, we layer intensity on top of that. So if we start increasing these variables, multiple variables at one time, that's going to increase our risk of injury. So one thing I see from a lot of people, they do everything simultaneously. We almost wait until that 12 or 16 or 20 week program is going to start. We didn't really train so well. in that off-season period of time. We're going from running a couple days a week, and then we go to 4 or 5 days a week. We're building mileage. We're adding speed work back in. Everything ramps up simultaneously. So we need to be realistic and smart about how our program ramps up over time to respect that principle there, frequency, duration, and intensity. Because if we can manage that, we can really reduce the risk of injury long-term and see better results from a running standpoint. Next one, the 80-20 rule. So you can see kind of that graph or that pie on the side of the screen there on that left side. 80% of our running should be easy and conversational. 20% should be hard. And this can fluctuate a little bit based on the person, based on how well they recover, nutrition, hydration, what race they're training for. So a lot of my ultra runners, they're running a lot of miles. We're not really doing 20% intensity. It's a lot more aerobic focused. So we're running a lot of easy marathon pace, threshold pace, not pushing the needle so far from a speed standpoint, because they need to sustain that slow, grueling pace for a long period of time. Some of the faster, get 5K, 10K runners, we might be pushing the envelope to a degree from a speed standpoint, but we're trying to kind of respect this as much as possible. So looking at the proportions of your running plan, and when I write a running plan and use a spreadsheet and lay things out, we have total mileage for that week. So we're just going to keep this simple. If that week there is 10 miles being run, we know, okay, 8 of those miles are going to be easy conversational. 2 of those miles are going to be speed work. And I actually have in the spreadsheet so it calculates itself. And then we can make sure we're falling into the right range in terms of easy running versus hard running. A lot of times we run a lot of our easy miles too fast, so they become speed work. This goes completely out of proportion to then it's 50% of our miles that week are harder than easy. We're adding speed work on top of that, right? We're not truly recovering, and then we end up being injured over time. So it's good to make sure we create a good foundation, a good aerobic foundation as the bottom of that pyramid. And then as we increase intensity and add more intensity into that, that is the speed work piece. But making sure you have a good foundation first and foremost is really important. I always recommend, and this is something I got from Jack Daniels a few years ago, is making sure some of the fastest speed work comes earlier in the plan. So people need to be prepared for this, and that's where off-season running comes in, and being prepared to enter the 12, the 16, the 20-week running plan is very important. Over time, as people progress, we'll say week 1 to week 16 in a running plan, we're already increasing duration, right? They're building mileage in preparation for that goal race. I want to be careful of also adding intensity on top of that. So that's where if I can add some of the faster paces early on when mileage is low, and then from there, I'm working on teaching this person how to run faster when mileage is low. So we're not creating too much overall stress on the body. Over time, as mileage increases, some of the paces actually will start to back down to, okay, I taught this person how to run fast. Now I'm going to teach them how to sustain that fast pace longer. So the pace actually starts to back down a little bit. Running volume increases, running intensity starts to back down, even though it's still present within the program. And that way I'm not adding more volume and intensity to the program simultaneously. That's kind of the approach that I take with a lot of people that works very well. As opposed to getting up to week 13 and 14 and think, oh, now I need to add some really fast speed working because race day is coming. That should already have been done probably weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Another important piece here with a proper running plan is accurately gauging intensity. So this is where deciding what metric works for you or combination of metrics. For a lot of people, if we're doing speed work, I usually like RPE or pace. RPE is rate of perceived exertion, which if you think on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being very easy, a very slow walk, 10 being 100% all-out effort, how do we tell this person how hard to run within that chart there, as you'll see from 1 to 10? Pace is generally pretty good from a speed work standpoint because heart rate is a little bit slower to respond. So if I tell you, you know what, out for 2 minutes, I want you to run at 140 to 150 beats per minute, your heart rate is slow to get up to that 140, 150. It's slow to come back down. So it's a really tough metric to gauge. So pace or RPE are very good when it comes to speed work. Heart rate, I really like for long runs or easy conversational runs, or even warm-ups and cool downs within a run, because you're going to kind of slowly fall into that range, and you can track your heart rate over time. There's not huge fluctuations if you're running easy, unless obviously you're coming across a hill or something else that's going to make that a lot more challenging. But you need to accurately gauge your intensity. So we don't want to just run hard to run hard. There are different pace ranges we aim for, which we'll look at here on the next slide, to make sure you're actually creating or working towards a specific physiological adaptation. So if we're trying to run in a threshold range, we're trying to improve aerobic, we're trying to improve endurance, we're trying to improve how the body gets rid of lactate, kind of that burning sensation within the tissues as you sustain a faster pace for a long period of time. We need to run at 88 to 92% of our max heart rate, right? So there's certain ranges we want to aim for. A lot of times I see people running fast just to run fast. We're not actually doing things in a very strategic way to achieve an outcome. We're just thinking hard work equals better results. And in return, we're really not getting nothing, or the adaptation, not really getting anything, or the adaptation we're aiming for. Last piece here, recovery is a requirement, right? So you can't work harder and always see better results. It's funny, I was talking to a kid, unrelated. He's a power lifter, so we're talking about strength training. I saw him in the gym the other day. He was talking about how he used to lift 5 days a week, and then his coach had him back down to 3 days a week. And as he backed down to 3 days a week, his numbers just significantly increased in terms of how much weight he could lift, how strong he was. And I think that rings true from a running standpoint as well. And as in society as well, right? We always think harder is better. The more I tax the body, the more I'm going to see in terms of improvements, which is not really the case. We need to find and really equalize that equation, right? Stress plus rest equals growth. So we need to match how much are we stressing the body. The more we stress the body, the more rest and recovery is needed. So if we're unable to recover from that effort, we're not going to grow. We're actually going to break down. So I think consider things from a recovery standpoint always: nutrition, hydration, sleep, hormonal balance, right? There's so many other things that go into proper recovery. Make sure you're recovering from your effort, because a lot of times I think the curse of the hardworking runner can ring true. You can work hard only to break yourself down and to see little to no results in the process. Now, these are some of the paces that I look at, and this is from Jack Daniel's VDOT calculator. So if you go on his website, you can put in recent or previous race times. You can select the race distance. It's going to tell you what your VDOT is as kind of an approximation of your VO2 max. The paces, you can see there's a series of paces here from easy, right? Easy is your slow conversational running, 65 to 90%, so 79% of your max heart rate. RPE kind of in that 3 to 4 zone. Marathon pace is 80 to 90% of your max heart rate. RPE here, and you can see how these get a little bit faster over time. So depending on what your needs are as a runner, you might gravitate to certain pace ranges more than others. If you're someone that needs to improve endurance, you're probably going to kind of hang out here in that easy to threshold range. That'll be a really good place, to work on endurance. So if you already have the speed, you can run fast. Right? We see that with fast 5K and 10K running, but things just fall off when it comes to half marathon or full marathon. That's me specifically. Probably want to work on more runs here. You don't really need to get much faster. We just need to work on harnessing that speed and putting that into play over longer distances. So those top 3 here would be a recommendation. If you're someone that truly needs to get faster, you need to sprinkle in these shorter, these more intense efforts, your interval pace and your repetition pace. So as you put in your time here, so say I'm a 2-hour half marathoner. So my pace for that half marathon was about a 9:09. It will tell you what your pace ranges are. And then you can kind of select your specific workouts that you need to incorporate in there, your speed work, to help to push the needle based on whatever the end goal is, right? Looking at your baseline, looking at the goal, how do I get from point A to point B? You can kind of select where those areas are that you're lacking. So interval and repetition pace a little faster. Repetition pace is pretty fast. Short efforts on I think even on the track to 200 to 800 meters. Really working on anaerobic power, speed, running economy. Interval pace is a little bit slower, but still very fast, right? These are some of your fartleks, aerobic power, VO2 max type training. I stay away from repetition pace with a lot of people, especially like my adult recreational runners. It's just so fast for a lot of people. I find a lot of adults have trouble hitting that pace. It's extremely frustrating. And then the recovery needed to do that and to do it well is greater than I trust in a lot of people, right? So I think sometimes being a little bit more on the conservative side, taking a longer time to get to that end goal, as opposed to pushing the body to that max level, is a little bit more reliable and less likely to create injuries. Now, different speed work options here, 4 different runs I want to introduce without detailing them out perfectly, but just providing you some suggestions and hopefully you can customize that. First one's a fartlek. Technically, fartlek, it's more like an unstructured speed workout if you look at like the Swedish definition of it. So you can do this as simple as if you're running. I'm thinking about when I lived in Milwaukee, right? When I was running, I can go different paces at different blocks, right? Blocks for 15 houses. I'm going to run a faster pace. I'm going to slow down to easy. I'm going to run a real fast pace, slow down. It could be unstructured in terms of picking up to a high intensity and ramping back down. I generally, when I write fartleks for people, we're usually doing 2 to 3 minutes. I try to keep them and kind of control those variables to a degree. So about 2 to 3 minutes at that faster interval pace. You can see the longer they run, the more recovery is needed. So if it's a 3-minute at interval pace, is a 2-minute walk recovery, and this is usually a type of run where I want people walking, they're pushing to 100%. So within that short period of time, and usually you really need those 2 minutes or that 1 minute to come back down from that max effort. I want you to walk and really let everything come back. So when you get back up and push for that next 2 to 3 minute segment, you can push and really hit that limit once again. We don't want a lot of fatigue compounding that, because the more we fatigue, the less we're really working on true running speed. So goal here is to improve running speed, VO2 max. This is going to be what I'll program for most people that are looking at getting faster, because it can be challenging and pretty tricky for people to hit some of these paces. So in terms of how much you're doing, this is where it comes into doing some calculations, right? So if you are running, we'll keep it simple, 10 miles per week. So 2 of those miles is going to be speed work. I might do, again, whether it's 2 miles of fartleks within one run, or do 1 mile of fartleks on one day and do 1 mile on the other day of either fartleks again or some other type of speed work. I'm going to figure out how much distance I cover, how many times I need to do this. Is it 6 times 2 minutes at interval pace with a 1 minute recovery? That in the end gives me 1 mile. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Or is it 8? Is it 10? Depending on how fast that person is running. That's where you figure out the details on how much of this type of run you need within your workout. And then you put on a nice, you put in addition there, a nice easy warm-up mile, a nice easy cool down mile. And you use those to actually work on increasing volume over time as well, and mileage. So that's the first one. That's fartleks. Next one's a tempo run. This is a very common one that I like for a lot of people. Looks simple in its design, but when executed properly can be very challenging. The goal of the tempo run, and as we hit this threshold pace, is to improve endurance. So this is for someone here. I mean, truthfully, everyone should be doing some type of tempo run or a threshold pace within their training plan. It's such a good pace to be running that has a lot of benefits to from a training and a physiological standpoint. So one thing we see as we run and as we pick up our intensity, our body produces this waste product called lactate. As lactate gets into the system, we have this burning, uncomfortable sensation. The better we can buffer that lactate and remove it from the system, the less that accumulates, the more likely we are to run faster for a longer period of time. If we're someone that cannot buffer lactate, that gets built up in our system, we tend to, our muscles, our nerves, all that stuff kind of shuts down over time, so we're unable to maintain that pace over a long period. So if we can improve that, it improves the sustainability of our running. We start looking at 10K, half marathon, full marathon, etc. So for this run, keeping it simple, doing a warm-up mile, 1 to 2 warm-up miles, 20 minutes at threshold pace, with a nice easy 4-minute jog afterwards. So you can see, compared to the fartleks before, this is where I'll actually have someone continue to run and jog as opposed to walk in between those segments, because we're focusing more so on endurance and buffering. So keeping that heart rate elevated, allowing them to get the blood to continue to circulate to a degree, is good from a recovery standpoint. Tends to be pretty tough, and obviously will depend on how fast you are to determine how many miles you get in that 20-minute threshold pace. I have some slower runners that in 20 minutes, they might get in 1.5, 2 miles. I have some faster runners that they're going to be getting 3+ miles in that 20 minutes, right? It really depends on the person. So you really need to scale it to your needs. But this threshold, this tempo run is a very good way to train building endurance and buffering of that lactate. Next up, hill repeats. I think one place you cannot go wrong, and obviously need to be mindful of the body, muscles and joints, with all the speed work, right? Depending on which one you select, depending on what kind of ailment or injury you have. When I look at hill repeats, I always consider what are the demands uphill, what are the demands downhill, and then how do I program it for that person? So if I have someone that's coming off of some knee pain, right? They have pain right in the front of the knee. I want them to be a little bit more conservative as they run downhill. They're probably going to overstride, land a little bit in front of their body. There's going to be a greater ground reaction force as that foot strikes down. So they need to be mindful of that. I want them to really work on that uphill running, really good for building strength and very respectful of the knees. So being mindful of your ailments can be important here with the different types of options as well, because some will work better than others. With this, we need to determine what our goal is. So hill repeats are not all created equal. Do we want to work on short hill repeats, which will build more so power and speed? Even 30 seconds is a little bit long from a power and speed standpoint, but just to keep it simple, anything short, explosive, you're really powering up as hard as you can. That will help you develop muscular power and translate to getting faster. If we work on more sustained hill repeats, anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes or half mile, or depending on what hills you have access to, we can go and work on endurance and strength. So you can determine what the goal is and what type of hills you have access to and which one you need to work on. Like I mentioned before, I might work on some of the power and speed and short hill repeats early on with the training plan. And then as that person builds power and speed, I'm going to then switch them to endurance and training. How do we maintain that speed and that ability to drive up a hill over a longer period of time that will translate to hopefully this hilly race or whatever it is. So question for you is, which one do you need to train, right? What are the demands of the race? So I have some that go out west and do some of these races that actually have a net downhill. So within the strength training plan, we're going to add exercises that really work on building good strength through the knees and the patellar tendon and the quads. It's going to decelerate. We're going to work on some downhill running as well, get them used to those demands. So you need to decide based on your race, are there certain parts of this hill that you actually want to train? Most everyone always does hill repeats. Hill repeats going uphill, but deciding on what are the demands of the race, how do I need to prepare my body for that race, you could realistically do uphill or downhill, depending on what you need to train there. Last one here is the progression run. So progression run is one of my favorites, and I think people fall into the trap, especially race day, depending on the race, getting overzealous from the beginning, running too fast, and then actually slowing down over time. So I love the progression run because it teaches patience early on. If we can be patient, depending on the distance of the run, first couple miles, and then from there continue to increase our pace over time, usually we can see some really good results at the very end. And it helps us not spike the heart rate and run at a very hard RPE early on. So this will help build endurance, also can build speed depending on how aggressive you are with the progressions, and teach progressive pacing over the course of a run. So this can be easily broken down. I just kind of showed you a suggestion, downloaded this offline, found a Google image of it. But you can see this person over a 10-mile run starting at 8:58, slowly picking up or gradually picking up over the course of that run, very gradual, increasing their pace over 10 miles, which is awesome. You can do this every mile. You can cut the run into thirds. So if you have a 9-mile run, first 3 miles at easy conversational pace, next 3 miles at, making this up, at marathon pace, next 3 miles at threshold pace, and you can build up. If this is a 5K runner or someone that really needs to put their foot on the gas early on, I'm probably still going to do some easy miles early on to get them warmed up properly for the run itself. But then we might be a little bit more aggressive in terms of the paces we hit once we get into that, to get them to be a little bit more specific to the race itself. So you can look at what the person needs. Are we building speed or building endurance? What paces are required for that race? Because I want to be training the body in a way that's going to carry over to race day. You can also use time. If it's a 60-minute run, again, every 10 minutes you build up the pace, right? So it's 6 different segments. Every 20 minutes you build up the pace, and it's 3 different segments. You can really adjust this based on your needs. So those are some thoughts as it relates to speed work and programming speed work for runners. Question you need to ask yourself is, do you need to improve speed or endurance, or both potentially? Because that will help you decide which route to go. From a training standpoint, you need to diligently hit your easy conversational pace. That should be something people do not mess up, do not miss. To me, that's so simple. It's easy. It's low hanging fruit. Sometimes we just need to understand what it's going to improve, right? A lot of times we think because it's not hard enough, it's not going to be effective or make me a better runner. But that creates a really big aerobic base, which we can put more speed, more intensity on top of. So really focus on hitting that easy conversational pace. 20% of your runs need to address speed or some type of speed endurance. So I think having a variety of paces within your plan is very important. It adds variety, right? Where we're teaching the body how to run, how to function at a variety of speeds. So we're constantly changing the range of motion, the amount of stress on the body, right? Just how we're stressing the body and the entire system. So from an injury prevention standpoint, having variety, having a wide pace range that you're running and not always just running. My easy pace is 10 to 11. That's all I do. We want some good variety within the plan because that will actually help us see better results, but also could reduce the risk of injury in the process there. So that's it, guys. That's it for everything. If you need help, if you feel like you're stuck right now, you may have seen, those of you in the Ignite You Run group, may have seen some details on that running reboot program. If you're looking at, you know what, I feel like I'm missing a lot of these key elements and I want to make sure I'm getting on track and doing something specific for me, I have this program. It is open. I am adding a couple more people over the next month or so. So if you want to look into your running plan, create something that's very custom for you and get more specific, hopefully have maybe get some type of spring race coming up or training just to get better, stay active, stay fit in some way, we can redesign that plan that's going to be more specific for you. So if you look on my website, GarrettMcLaughlin.com, you'll see that running reboot program. If you just shoot me a message, we can talk about getting that created for you. So it would include a running plan, also would include a strength training, injury prevention plan, or deciding based on what you're working on, your goals, your injury history, and where you're at, what is the most important thing for you to see results. And that running reboot program would really help you get on track there. Any questions? And just know, for you guys who are hanging on here, I'm going to send the replay tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. So if you had to sign off, if you missed anything and you want to go back, you're welcome to watch that replay at a later time. Any final questions as we wrap up here? Let me know and we can talk about that for a second. All right, guys. So I appreciate you. Hopefully we'll see if something comes through, I can answer it or reach out directly if I sign off before it comes into the chat here. But I appreciate you joining me this Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. It was a random time, right? I knew a lot of people weren't going to join at this time, but for me, it was the best fit. So I thought it would be good just to make it convenient and get the information out there. But I hope you guys have thank you, Patty. Thank you, Jessica. Have a great rest of your Thursday and a great weekend. Questions, comments, feedback, feel free to reach out to me directly, and have a good rest of your week. Thanks, everyone.